Hello, everybody. This is Megan,
And this is Alana.
and welcome to Tea Time Crimes.
Welcome to our show where I bring the tea and she bring the crime.
Yes, welcome. If you're new, hello. And I typically bring a crime that Alana knows nothing about, and she brings a tea that neither one of us know anything about, except occasionally when Alana
Very
will grace
seldomly.
us with a story. But kick it off. You got anything ridiculous to share or a tea to start?
Yeah, let's just jump into a tea.
All right, let's dive in.
So this is from the Bar Harbor
Bahaba.
Tea Company. It's a wild Maine blueberry green tea that I got
Ooh.
when I was in Bar Harbor. Let's see this. In 2006, Bar Harbor Tea Company introduced a collection of all-natural teas artfully blended in small batches in Bar Harbor. The tradition of excellence continues today using fresh, high-quality ingredients that steep a uniquely superior cup.
Awesome.
A natural and delicious way to enjoy the best tea blends from the coast of Maine.
Aw, my aunt lives in Maine, and I love blueberry picking at her house.
That's so cool. I didn't never put it together that Blueberries for Sale was in Maine.
Oh yeah, she sent me that book, and we
that
read
was
it
a big
still.
Yeah, that was a big childhood book for me.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm glad it made it to the coast.
Made it to the other coast. So the ingredients here, not really anything crazy.
Blueberries?
Organic green tea, wild Maine blueberries,
There it
corn
is.
flower petals, and natural flavor. And it was a short steeping time. So see, it's a nice green tea.
You despise that.
It might be okay though, because it smells fruity.
Mm.
Has the nice sticky fingers of a green tea.
Who doesn't love sticky fingers?
And it's a good green tea. Sometimes you can get just something like really weak and it's like, why bother?
Yeah.
It's a nice solid green tea. You get the blueberries right away. They're just like dropping in your mouth.
Plop, plop. Like in Blueberry for Sal's Pail.
Oh, wow.
What is it? Plick, plop?
I know what you're talking about, but it's been so long since I've read it.
I know.
This is a good green tea. I wasn't expecting the green tea to be such quality. And it's blueberry forward. It is what it says it's going to be.
When you say anything forward, it kills me.
It is, though. Gosh, what would I rate this? I mean, do we just got to say a blueberry thumbs up?
I guess. This is your
This
world.
is the most blueberry tea I've had. And usually, you know when they bake blueberry, like blueberries by themselves, absolutely superb, wonderful fruit. But when you bake them, they get a little too sweet for me, or like a blueberry jam's a little too sweet.
Really? Not for me, but I have way more of a sweet tooth than you do. I drink frosting. So.
This is good. It's not too sweet or too fruity because, you know, it could be dangerous around teas. They did have a black tea version of this and a fruit tea version, but I was like, I'm going to go green because green is good.
I would have liked to try the black tea version. Yeah, don't give me that disapproving face.
It's just not I don't love the fruit in my black teas. But yeah, this is great. I would love to try more of their teas.
Cool. Who's the company again?
Bar Harbor Tea Company.
All right. Bahaba.
Bahaba.
Wicked good tea.
Wicked good.
Are you ready to begin?
Maybe.
Yeah, you know you are.
Okay.
It is a unofficial continuation of last week.
Okay.
So we talked about Eleanor Jarman last week, the blonde tigress. Go ahead and check it out if you haven't. You don't need to, but
you do. Go look at it.
I mean, this will be more enjoyable if you do, but you don't need to. And we talked about Eleanor was arrested and went to Oakdale prison.
Mm-hmm. Really cool place.
Yeah. So that's where we're going to circle back to.
Oh, we're going back on the bus.
Saturday, September 2nd, 1933, hundreds of people flocked to the station as 5 women were ushered onto a train to be sent to Oakdale Reformatory, where they'd carry out the sentences handed to them by judge and jury. The women on the passenger train were Eleanor Jarman, Bessie Opas, Vera Carl, Louise Murphy, and Katherine Brockman. All the attention, as we talked about, went to Eleanor, the blonde tigress, and, the most dangerous woman alive, apparently. But what happened to the 4 other women sitting next to her to earn themselves a seat? So first off, Katherine Brockman, she was simply robbery. 1 to 10 years. She was a bait to distract gentlemen while her male accomplice would steal. Exciting stuff. She's in her 20s. I feel like she wasn't an A rating in Miss Helen Hazard's world, but maybe.
Okay.
I don't know how long she served, but she was sentenced to 1 to 10 years. That's a huge range. Next up, you had Louise Murphy. There was not a lot on her. I was hoping there would be, considering she's a murderer, but there was not. She killed her partner, William, who the press called her common law husband. So they'd obviously been together for years for that title to be used. There's no coverage other than this one article where the judge sentenced her to 20 years. And he said, her testimony was unbelievable. I believe she shot this man deliberately. So I'm assuming from that statement that her defense was that she did it accidentally. And they didn't believe her.
Got it.
And then there's Bessie Opas. She's something. I wish there was more on Bessie, that she could have her own episode, because well, maybe not. She probably would have liked it. But she was arrested and found guilty of conspiracy to kill her husband. His name is Marion. I'm just going to call him Mr. Opas. Although the plan was never carried out. He was actually never even injured because, get this, on June 20th, 4 teenage boys showed up at Mr. Opas's automobile dealership. And they just kept asking to see certain cars. Their behavior was suspicious enough that Mr. Opas called the police and held back 19-year-old Dominic Sulo, and Dominic was brought in for questioning. Very quickly, Dominic admitted that he was there to point out who Mr. Opas was to the other boys because they had a plan to kill him, which had been orchestrated by Bessie, Mrs. Opas. With him were 17-year-old John DeSalvo, 21-year-old, so I guess he's not a teenager, Angelo Masso, and 18-year-old Jerry Lehman. The boys, or men, whatever you want to call them, I don't know, had been given a $50 deposit. And the plan was they were going to kidnap Mr. Opas, hold him hostage until the remaining $5,000 that Bessie had agreed to pay them was paid, and then they were going to kill him.
Jesus.
That's an unbelievably terrible plan.
It's awful.
I mean, first off, this is what I like to imagine. They literally didn't even attempt the plan. Mr. Opas discovered it right away just by looking at them and thinking, you guys are being weird.
Yeah.
And I'm going to call the cops. They didn't even have the cool or the plan or the execution to kidnap him.
They're teenagers.
Right. You know how hard it is to kidnap somebody and hold them hostage? And then these men are not cold-blooded killers, obviously.
Yeah.
Then to just hold somebody hostage and then just murder them in cold blood, like
Pitiful.
days later. I'm willing to bet had they gotten through any stage of the plan, Mr. Opas would still have come out alive at some point because they wouldn't have been able to do it, or he would have just like elbowed somebody and run. It was unbelievable. So they take in all of the boys and Mrs. Opas. And I mentioned the only one who wasn't a teenager, Angelo. With his arrest, it led to an unsolved murder from a few years prior actually also being solved because Angelo and his friends had gotten into a small car accident with a man named Homer Barnhart. Sorry, said his name really weird. Homer Barnhart, there we go, which caused the men to get in a fight, and Barnhart dared Angelo to shoot him, and Angelo did.
Whoa, that's a dare that you don't take.
Yeah.
Actually.
And that's what the people with Angelo said. They said, you don't dare Angelo.
No.
Because apparently he was known for following through on a dare. And
oh boy,
Barnhart didn't know him. It was kind of, a fender bender, and they got in a fight, and I think Angelo pulled the gun, and the guy's like, yeah, go ahead and do it. And
then he did it.
So that solved that murder.
What an idiot.
Anyway, Bessie, right? She's being pulled in because the boys talked really quickly. She told police that her husband was abusive, and that's why she had created this plot. And she said she agreed to pay them $5,000 from her husband's life insurance, which was $30,000. But it must not have been directly from her husband's life insurance, because if the plan was to hold him hostage in a hotel until the money came, obviously there's a little bit of a hitch in that plan.
I wonder if she was planning to, like, really kill him.
Well, she would have. You don't get the money unless he's
that's what I'm
dead.
saying.
So she would have had to have the money, I guess, in another way, and didn't want to pay it all up front. But doesn't matter, because this confession for Bessie was short-lived, and within 24 hours, Bessie claimed that this was, in fact, what actually had occurred. This is a quote. 2 months ago, these boys came to me. They demanded money and said they were going to kill my husband if I didn't pay. I couldn't give them anything because I have no money. Then they threatened to kill me if I told them about it. I was afraid, so I didn't. I don't know, Bessie. First off, I don't believe she doesn't have any money. I think you could probably make it work. Well, obviously, you're about to give him $5,000. Second, you're not going to tell your husband that a 17-year-old threatened you? Come on.
Yeah.
Come on now. Anyway, Bessie's attorney kind of goes with this theory and says that he actually thinks, he takes it a step further, that Mr. Opas actually orchestrated this whole thing.
What?
So that he could blame Bessie for this, because Bessie had tried to leave him on previous occasions
my
due to the
God.
domestic abuse.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it got messy quick. Mr. Opas initially shared his opinion that he thought his wife was, quote, crazy. And he stressed that she was always financially provided for, car, money, clothes. And she'd even run off with another man at one point and come back to him. You know, he'd allowed her to come back. And so he thought that she'd wanted to be married to him. And then one day he got a little nervous, though, because she made this really weird comment of, we should go get a drink because it might be your last.
Whoa.
And he was like, what's that? Or maybe he said our last, or something. It was something on the lines like, you never know when it'll be your last beer, honey.
Yeah.
And he got a little bit, a little bit of intuition kick in of like, what? Why'd you say it that way?
Warning.
But a month later, Bessie would appear in court in a direct quote, stunning go-to-court frock of blue with pink and white printed flowers.
Go-to-court frock.
And it was stunning.
I have about 3 of those.
A stunning frock. I know. I immediately pictured her in one of your grandma 90s.
Oh.
I was thinking, is that what one wore to court in the 30s?
No way.
Anyway, it was stunning.
A frock. That's one of the ugliest words in the English language. Frock.
I don't know if we want to go down that path. Bessie entered a plea of not guilty. And she also asked for a separate trial from these punks, as she was calling them.
Oh.
But the group of defendants was not all 4 of them, because Jerry, he was the only person who said he was innocent.
Oh.
And the other 3 pled guilty.
Oh.
So Jerry would have a separate trial, which I couldn't find the outcome of later on.
Okay.
They actually said Jerry was thought to be one of the main 2. But can you imagine if you just went along for the ride and you had absolutely no idea and this bullshit was happening?
You're like, what the fuck?
They were just like, hey, do you want to go for a quick spin down to the car dealership and imagine that we own a Mustang? And he's like, yeah, sure. And then you get there and they're like, why is that guy yelling at you? What's happening? Why are we staring at that man? Anyway, I don't know if Jerry was innocent or not.
Oh, Jerry.
So Bessie's in court pretty quickly.
Yep.
Within the month, so from the month that this plan, did it even happen? From the month that this plan was talked about, nothing even happened. I don't even think he stubbed a toe. Mr. Opas was fine.
Yeah.
He immediately thought this was weird. But within that month, from when it happened to trial, Mr. Opas came to believe Bessie and forgive her.
Wow.
Yeah. He told the court he believed Bessie's story of extortion. And during the trial, Mr. Opas showed up supporting his wife and even kissing her in open court.
That's an interesting relationship.
It's just gross in general. So,
kissing?
Yeah, just kissing in court. No thanks. Keep it together. Luckily, in my opinion at least, the jury did not feel the same way and found Bessie Opas guilty of conspiracy of murder.
Okay.
At her sentence hearing, Bessie claimed she was found guilty due to jury tampering. And she tried that angle for a minute. I don't even think the judge is listening at this point. Ma'am.
He's flicking through his Archie comics. Nope, that's the 50s.
He's a real visionary. Go get your frock dry cleaned because you're going to jail, all right?
Yeah.
He handed out, I think, the maximum sentence, which was 1 to 5 years, which didn't seem that long.
Well, just conspiracy.
This always bugs me. The fact that you're bad at planning shouldn't give you less time. Your intention was still there.
That's fair.
Just because she was absolutely terrible with it and sent 3 17-year-olds who hadn't graduated from high school and didn't know their way around life to do it, and then do it over the course of several days terribly. It doesn't mean that she should get less time. But anyway, 1 to 5 years and a $2,000 fine. As she was getting ready to board this train to Oakdale, she told the Tribune, I expect to get out in 2 or 3 years. I'm going to be a good girl in jail. This woman's in her late 30s, by the way. And I expect my husband will relent after a short time and help me. I think he will pay my fine for me.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, they have 2 kids together, FYI.
It's an interesting relationship.
Yeah, with a little distance, I don't think Mr. Opas continued to feel so forgiving because a few months later, he filed for divorce. And in November of the same year, Bessie sued him for alimony because she wanted to buy cigarettes and candy at the commissary.
Fair. I mean, I'd want some candy. And a cigarette probably helps with the stress.
The judge said, I'm not going to make jail too pleasant for this woman. Which I was 100% behind. And then he finished the statement with this. Besides, I don't believe in women smoking.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Relax.
Okay, judge. Get it together. Also, what about the candy? Come on. What if it was candy cigarettes? Would that be okay with you, judge?
No, I want candy.
Yeah. Anyway, rude. So I think that Bessie got out. I believe that they did divorce and he remarried.
Okay.
It's very likely that he also was abusive.
You're right. Right. That's what I'm saying. It's like probably a very complicated relationship.
Very complicated. But I would argue that maybe Bessie was also abusive because there has to
she
be
at least
some
cheated on him.
level of emotional abuse where you're leaving with men and coming back and almost killing him and he forgives you. There's
it's a little weird.
Neither one of them.
It's not healthy. We'll just put it that way.
No. So that's Miss Bessie Opas, which to me
Bessie
seems more dangerous already than Eleanor.
Yeah.
Also, Louise, even though it was brief, seems like she's not going to take any crap either. Katherine, Katherine seems to me like Eleanor if George hadn't pulled the gun.
Fair.
That's the path that probably Eleanor's life should have taken, is that 1 to 10 years. But anyway, on to the last one and the meatiest one in terms of substance. I think she was actually quite petite. Vera Carl. Okay. On July 16th, 1932, Chicago shopkeeper George Carl was found dead in his home. The store and apartment located at 2511 South Crawford Ave was closed for the day, but his wife of 13 years, Vera, and their 9-year-old son, Doran, found George's body when they returned home later that evening.
Oh, God.
George had been shot twice in both temples while preparing his fishing gear for a trip the following morning.
What? Both temples?
Yes. There was no sign of a gun anywhere in the shop, and the storerooms had been ransacked, leading police to assume the murder was probably a botched robbery. What you got? You really thinking about those temples? He'd been shot twice.
Do you think it was at the same time?
Well, I'll explain it. It'll come out. Okay. So police think it's a robbery gone wrong, and they weren't expecting George to be there, or they were, and that was what they were doing.
Yeah.
But Doran Carl, the 9-year-old boy, told Lieutenant Burns earlier that week his mother had told him Daddy would be killed by a stick-up man. Now, before you jump to conclusions about Vera explained this.
Well, I also know she's on the bus.
Well, it didn't go well for her, but doesn't mean it was a right conviction, but it maybe does. She had gone to a fortune teller with her mother.
Oh, boy.
Yes, and the fortune teller, Mrs. Ballo, who, by the way, has a robin as a pet.
Oh.
Yeah, I knew you'd love that. Pulled 3 cards from her tarot deck. Death, a widow, and the magistrate. FYI, death does not mean actual literal death if you're in the tarot
I
cards.
know.
So everybody calm down. Vera told police that Mrs. Ballo had said, quote, the first 2 cards mean your husband will be murdered, and by that death you will get money. However, Mrs. Ballo also pointed out that Vera would have a little bit of trouble with the officials over this impending death. Believe what you will, but Vera swears this is what happened, and her mother, Mrs. Greilich, was also there. They told George that he was in danger, and he laughed it off.
What?
Obviously, imagine this actually happening. Logic would dictate that either Vera or Mrs. Ballo killed George, because how do you know about it beforehand?
Right. Like, did Mrs. Ballo corroborate the story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mrs. Ballo is fascinating to me. She might just be amazing.
Oh.
What if she just picked up on this scheme? I don't know. Anyway.
Very superstitious.
It's Stevie Wonder got the motivation for that song. But Vera has an alibi. She wasn't at the store when the murder occurred. She'd been with her mother, her son, and a friend who could vouch for her being elsewhere. I assume the same could be said for Mrs. Ballo because they questioned both women.
Okay.
Maybe the Robin tweeted them a little bit of info. Still, the police, questioned Vera pretty hard because that seems unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
They also question her brother Ivan because coincidentally, Ivan had sold George a life insurance policy on March 4th. And guess who was the beneficiary?
Oh, boy. Yeah.
The Robin. No, just kidding. Vera.
The Robin!
And the policy doubled in the event of a violent death.
That's weird.
That is weird.
That shouldn't be sold.
I'm sure it's not a thing anymore. Well, maybe it is. I guess I don't know.
That's wild.
Yeah. Ivan denied any involvement in the murder and even the insurance policy. He claimed to be at a gambling house the night of the murder, which is a pretty hard alibi to prove because if you're at a gambling house, you're not going to go to the cops and be like, oh, yeah, I saw that guy there.
Yeah.
You're probably on the down low if you're at a gambling house in 1932.
For sure.
But a witness came forward saying that they actually saw Ivan near George's store between 11 and 11:30 at night. And FYI, George's body was discovered by Vera and her son around midnight.
It's pretty late for a 9-year-old to be up.
That's what I'm saying. It seems like you're intentionally out of the house. As somebody who has a 7-year-old, I'm back at home. But I also go to bed at 8:30. So maybe I'm not the best person to gauge.
No. 9-year-olds don't go to bed at midnight.
Unless there's a special event, you're not keeping
like
your kid
shower.
out. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. A meteor shower. Unless there's a shooting star in the sky.
My dad used to wake us up for 3 a.m. meteor showers.
Oh, that's sweet. But now I was thinking more Babe Ruth came to town and you were getting his autograph kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah, it seemed big. Before she returned home, Vera was visiting a friend's store with her son. Then the three of them, so Vera's son and friend, went to Mrs. Greilich's house, which is Vera's mother. They had a drink there, and then they went back to the friend's house before returning home.
Okay.
So every minute is accounted for, and there's other people there who say that's where Vera was. This murder could be planned for the insurance money, which is what the police are getting at.
Right.
Mrs. Ballo could also be the real deal. And just happened to, or both could be true. Maybe she just guessed. Vera came in and she's like, oof, this is about to happen, about to go down. I can see it. Many people believe in Mrs. Ballo and her powers, and I don't know if powers is too much, in her readings and her ability, and would like the police to hold a seance with Mrs. Ballo and George. The police captain does not appreciate that suggestion.
Okay.
And is pretty violent about it in the papers. It's like, get it together, everybody.
Yeah.
Instead, I'm going to send the bullets to the ballistic experts instead of holding a seance with a woman who owns a pet robin. But thank you for the suggestion.
That's amazing.
He also administers a lie detector test at Northwestern to both Ivan and Vera. But the results, inconclusive. Vera's test was unable to be interpreted. This is probably because at every turn, Vera's fainting.
Okay, not helpful on the heart rate.
During the questioning, just every part of it. During the funeral, during the questioning.
Get her some Oreos.
She's just fainting. Some of the papers refer to her as crippled, which is obviously an old 1930s term that I dislike. But I don't know. They don't say what. They say from a childhood ailment. So I wonder if maybe she had a limp or
low blood pressure.
I don't. Is that would that fall under? I know low blood pressure fell under insanity at one point. I don't know if it falls under. Anyway, she's fainting left and right, dropping like a fly.
Fainting.
Because of that, I imagine it's hard to get a baseline.
Yeah.
She's hooked up to the wires. Can you please state your name?
Yeah.
For the count. All right. Guess not. I guess we'll just go with Vera. Even if the captain had wanted to do a seance, by the way, which he did not, Mrs. Ballo is super busy. Business is now booming.
Oh, interesting.
Folks are lined up down the street. She's got her son at the door collecting the money, $1 a reading.
Wow.
She went out and bought herself a brand new deck of tarot cards.
I mean, good for her. You got to make it some way during the 30s. And if this is the way you do it.
Yeah. This is a once in a lifetime chance.
Yeah.
If this is just absolute coincidence, Or maybe you picked up on something and it paid off. Lean into that,
Yeah,
Mrs. Ballo.
seriously.
That Robin's not going to feed himself. But as the summer progressed, Mrs. Ballo makes time to give Vera another reading, letting the newly widowed woman know that she soon would be cleared of any wrongdoing or suspicion around George's death.
Ah.
And on August 6th, Mrs. Ballo was right again because Vera and her brother were cleared by the grand jury, who decided
What?
not to move forward with charges for either of them.
What?
Yeah. And just like that, Vera Carl was free.
But who killed her husband?
Well, until February of 1933, which is how she got to be on the bus with Eleanor.
But you can't try someone twice for the same crime.
Well, she wasn't acquitted. She just it was brought to the grand jury and they decided not to press charges because they didn't think that there was enough evidence. The case had never been brought to trial.
Oh, I see.
So in February of 1933, not one, but 4 people confessed to the murder.
What?
None of them Vera.
It's Zorro.
What? What's that from?
You know, Zorro?
Yeah.
Where everybody else is like, I'm Zorro.
Oh, I don't remember.
They're trying
that.
to protect him.
Now, these confessions didn't just come out of thin air. Unsatisfied with the grand jury's decision, 2 detectives, Detective Preibel and Detective Gray, keep tabs on Vera. They noticed that she withdrew most of the insurance money right away, and that 2 young men who had been friendly with the family left town right away. Edward Velselka and Joseph Fess. When the 2 men returned to Chicago, because quite a bit of time had passed, right?
Yeah.
It happened in the summer of 1932. They were picked up and brought to the station for questioning. It was not long before they started talking, naming Vera and her brother Ivan and a 50-year-old man named John Milosic as the planners of this murder.
Oh, man.
You think it's Milosic or Milosic? Milosic?
Milosic? I don't know.
Milosic. Anyway, John. Just like Edward and Joseph, John told the police the truth. He claimed he wanted to marry Vera.
Oh.
And George's $15,000 insurance policy was just an added bonus. As the Chicago Tribune put it, middle-aged love coupled with avarice was given as the motive.
Oh.
Weird way to put it.
It's nice. Now, I every time you say Chicago, I am wanting pizza and giardiniera more and more. So this is really hard for me.
I'm sorry. Even though it's like 8:30 in the morning.
Correct.
Yeah. Cool. Pizza's good for breakfast, actually.
Right?
Yeah, it is. It's good all the time. Lunch.
It's all the time. Dessert.
Dinner. Dessert. But dessert.
Have you had a dessert pizza? Anyways.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd like it. What do you have on it?
Really good. There's like Nutella and fruit on it. Or there's also like a sweet icing one that you could do. That's a breakfast pizza, actually. And you could have like sweet icing with fruit.
Like a Pop-Tart or a toaster strudel?
I mean, it's in the shape of a pizza.
I think we're being pretty liberal with pizza if it's just in a triangle.
It's in a circle.
Or a circle, then into a triangle. I knew you were going to do that. I knew you were going to shape police that. Like,
just saying.
Obviously, you don't eat the whole circle.
Well, it depends who you are.
Okay. Well, I don't. Anyway. Okay. According to John, the middle-aged love man, this was his idea. But he briefed Vera and Ivan on the plan. He didn't just go rogue. They were in on it. They all agreed to it. George owed John money.
Okay.
And so this was John's way of getting the money back.
I
And
see.
apparently also marrying Vera.
Right.
The 2 seem not as connected as one would think. And it's almost like he just keeps throwing that in there as if that'll make it look better. Oh, and I was going to take his wife as well as the money.
Got it.
He said, I intended to marry Mrs. Carl when everything quieted down. It doesn't even seem like they're in this really passionate love affair. He's like, well, you know what? Some time's passed.
Right.
And we've got that $15K, then maybe we'll look at a wedding.
Interesting.
Ivan Greilich, so her brother, eventually confessed that this was in fact true, but then he later recanted.
Well, you can't do that.
Well, he did it. Neither he nor John wanted to be the one to do the actual murder. So they reached out to Edward, who was a 28-year-old unemployed man who needed money and apparently was violent enough that they considered him.
Jeez.
But Edward would not agree on the price. He wanted more money for it. They wouldn't give it.
Got it.
So that forced John and Ivan to look elsewhere. And that's when they reached out to Joseph Fess, who was 26 years old and also unemployed. He agreed to do it for $800. I know.
Rough.
The original plan was for Joseph to drown George.
Whoa.
Yeah. John orchestrated this fishing trip to Grass Lake, but Joseph claimed there was never an opportunity to push George off the boat. That's how they were going to do it, to make it look like an accident. So when they returned, John secured a gun and gave it to Joseph. But this was only after scrapping their second plan, which was to hit George over the head with a hammer, push him down the stairs, make it look like an accident.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. It's really icky. Also, because I have never been in 1930s papers as much as these last few weeks.
Yeah.
I found a couple side stories that if you don't want to hear, I guess hit fast forward, but they were just fascinating to me. As I'm reading about this plan, which is very brutal and gross, right under it, there was this tiny little article about a man who went to visit his friends, and he was actually the godfather of one of their kids. And as a prank, I guess, he dressed up as a woman and went to their door, and they didn't recognize him. And so the woman screamed when she saw him. And then the man grabbed his gun and shot his friend. And it said the mystery was solved in the Mercy Hospital when they realized that it was actually their friend. He was fine. He was just shot in the shoulder.
Oh,
but
okay.
How weird is that?
That is strange. I was thinking through this, I wonder if there's just an uptick of crimes or violence in the 30s.
Totally.
You're
is.
especially
desperate. Robberies.
Yeah, you're desperate and you're also scared.
Yeah, and that's why I wonder if, because that to me seems you're real quick to pull a gun and shoot a woman in your hallway.
You're scared.
So was he so unrecognizable that they didn't realize it was him and they thought it was a man dressed as a woman coming to rob them?
Any straight, people are just on fucking edge during the 30s.
But the women, women are killing their husbands and robbing left and right in the 30s.
It's a desperate time. You got to do what you got to do to survive.
It was so fascinating to think about that, because if somebody came to my door, my first thought would never be pull a gun. Anyway, that's a rough. Yeah. Hopefully that ended up being a funny story they could tell later.
Right.
He fully recovered, but I was shocked. Is the man not being no, it's me, and whipping off the wig? Was he really committed to the bit?
It might have been just so fast.
I guess that's a quick draw. Anyway, that was on there. But the confession of the four men mostly match up, except for Ivan's now, because according to law enforcement, Ivan really downplayed his role in the crime and attempted to protect Vera from any wrongdoing at all.
Oh.
Ivan did admit, though, that he was present at the time of the shooting, and he started playing himself off as more of a witness than an accomplice. But Joseph's confession, that's the man who actually murdered George, explained that Ivan was much more involved than he was letting on. This is what Joseph says happened. They went to George's store, Ivan and Joseph together, just those two, and they were having a drink with George. And then it was Ivan who gave the command for Joseph to shoot. Kind of okay, go.
Oh.
Joseph admits to pulling the trigger 2 times. So that's where the 2 shots are. To which Ivan responded, "Good work." Edward, the man who refused to do it, I think was still involved. He was outside, maybe as a lookout. And so Joseph gave him the gun and Edward got rid of it. Threw it in a drainage pipe.
Do you think George was sitting or standing?
Well, there's even more details later on.
Okay.
So give me a minute. Vera, of course, denies all of this. She's quoted in the Chicago Tribune as saying, "I swear to you that I knew nothing about the plot to murder my husband," she said calmly. "And I'll have you know, I never had any idea of marrying John Milosic."
Oh.
So, sorry, John, that wasn't happening. But a quick accounting look showed that Vera had already withdrawn about $10,000 of the $15,000 policy, with $1,000 going to Ivan, $800 going to John, who I assume paid Joseph.
Doesn't look good.
Yeah, and then a decent amount also going to Mrs. Greilich, her mother.
Oh.
Unlike Eleanor, Vera and these men are granted separate trials. Eleanor had to be tried with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So Joseph testifies at John's trial. He implicates John, Ivan, and Vera, stating the main motive was because George owed John money, not necessarily the middle-aged love story. The day of the murder, the group called Vera, who told them everything was set, meaning she and Doran were leaving the house and George was going to stay behind.
Okay.
Vera even told them that she pulled the blinds in advance so that they wouldn't have to do it and alert George, and that no one could see it.
Wow.
Because that is a weird move if you think about it. If you're drinking, it's dark out and you suddenly just walk over and pull the blind shut.
Yeah.
That would be creepy.
Yeah.
So she went ahead and took care of that detail for them. And here's where the most heartbreaking detail of Joseph's confession and story comes to lay, and the reason George was shot twice. The first shot didn't kill him. George got back up
What?
and asked Ivan, his brother-in-law, for a towel. Think of how scared he must have been in that moment and so confused.
He's a bullet in his brain.
And that's when Joseph shot him again. Joseph was only given part of the fee that day before he left Chicago to hide in a small town. And then John paid him the rest of the $800 once the policy was cashed. Edward also testified against John, confirming that he'd been offered $500, turned it down, and then connected them with Joseph. John was found guilty and sentenced to life. Ivan, same. Both were sent to Joliet Correctional Facility, which is where Leo from Eleanor's case was also sent. If you look on the prison census, you can see them all there together. Vera's trial came next. Joseph and Edward testified against Vera as well. In John's confession, remember, he'd kind of taken the responsibility of being the mastermind.
Yeah.
But Joseph said it was Vera.
Huh.
And then Ivan more than anyone else, claiming that Vera threatened to hurt herself if the men did not carry through with the plan.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Vera, of course, throughout the trial continued to deny absolute any knowledge about the plan. She certainly didn't plan it, shouldn't even know about it.
Yeah.
Sadly, her alibi is the fact that she was with her son, so Doran has to testify. His mother was with him. Yeah. Vera's answers for the majority of the money missing. Remember how it was all kind of paid out real quick?
Yeah.
She said she gave the money to Ivan and John because George owed them money. So she was paying off a debt. And then the rest of the funds went to George's funeral.
What about Joseph?
I think George's money went to Joseph, right? Because she gave George $800, which was the amount. So I think George paid Joseph.
George paid Joseph?
I'm sorry. No, yeah, that was really a weird twist. George paid Joseph for his own death. No, John paid.
Okay.
Sorry. The $800 went to John, and then John paid
Joseph. Got it.
Yeah. You'd think that this would be pretty easy to confirm because you could just go to the funeral home and see how much George's funeral cost. But nobody said boo about it. They just threw that in there. The widow insisted that George's death was simply in the cards. That's what she said. But the state points out another odd detail in all of this, along with the money, along with the confession of the other men. Vera also waited 45 minutes the night of the murder before she called the police.
That's weird.
She called a friend first.
No.
Yeah. Seems a little off.
Yeah, that's not right.
It took about 3 hours for the jury to find Vera guilty of conspiracy to murder.
Okay.
She was sentenced to 14 years at Oakdale. Upon hearing the verdict, Vera fainted.
Classic.
Obviously. Classic Vera, you know.
Classic Vera. What about her son?
I know. Once she came to, she was inconsolable for days, sobbing in her cell. We always said tears will help you, but I don't think they helped Vera in this. It was too late.
Yeah, you're an asshole.
In an attempt to help her pull herself together, the prison let Vera visit with Bessie Opas.
Oh.
Because they're going to the same place. I don't know if this was like some sort of weird matchmaking. But to Vera's dismay, this turned into somewhat of a photo op for Bessie.
Oh.
Who was less upset about what had happened to her and was happy to chat to the press while she looked very, nurturing towards Vera.
Yeah. Got it.
She also apologized that she was still wearing the old pink and blue dress with flowers, but not to worry because Mr. Opas was going to buy her a new dress soon.
Oh, phew.
Yeah, because that frock is played out. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's played.
I mean, it's not a go to jail frock.
Nah. You need something a little bit, thinking like a black.
Maybe subdued a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit more subdued. We don't need flowers at Oakdale. Hesitantly, Vera agreed to one picture with Bessie. You should see it. Vera looks destroyed, and Bessie looks like she's trying to emulate
Miss America.
She looks more like she's trying to be just the most beautiful, caring woman on the planet, holding Vera in her arms.
Oh, boy.
Vera did say to the press, "The law made a terrible mistake, and I am going to fight to the finish. My case will be carried to the Supreme Court if I can't get a new trial. I am not guilty, and my brother is not guilty. I didn't know anything about a plot. I've got to get out for the sake of my mother and my boy."
I mean...
Which might be the real motivation. She doesn't want to leave her son.
I know, but like...
I know.
You
but
did it.
Don't kill your husband.
Yeah.
By the end of the summer, Joseph was also found guilty and sentenced to 99 years. He died 13 years later in prison.
But he was only 26.
Yeah, he died of a heart condition.
What?
Edward was sentenced to 1 to 2 years as an accessory. So hopefully he turned his life around.
Yeah.
Shortly after, on September 2nd, Vera was transported to Oakdale, where her life with Superintendent Helen Hazard was just about to start kicking off.
Yeah.
Love that woman.
Love her.
The papers headline the event with Eleanor at the center of it. Eleanor is the center of every single headline that Vera and Bessie are attached to.
Okay.
The Chicago Tribune quoted Vera as well in this article, though, saying, 14 years is a long time, but I have a chance to be out in 8 years. My son will be a grown man by that time, and I will have a lot to live for. So Vera's already kind of accepting the time. She wants to get out in 8 years.
That could be a grown man.
Yeah. I mean, he'll be
17?
He's probably, say he's 10. Let's round up.
Okay.
I mean,
pushing the envelope.
in that day and age, are you kidding me? 17? You're going to war. You're getting married.
True. Yeah, he probably went to World War II, actually.
Well, hold on. She's already trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And
Yeah.
if you believe she's guilty, in the court system, she's just as guilty as Eleanor. Eleanor, remember, was given 199 years. Vera, who killed her own husband, was given 14 and could be out in 8. It's
such a
wildly
shame.
different.
It's such a shame.
Also, a reporter who accompanied the woman on the trip to Oakdale. Remember, if you didn't listen to last week, or just as a refresher, Oakdale looks more like the University of Chicago than Cook County Jail. It's pretty stunning. He overheard one of the women say, he didn't say which one, but we can guess. She said, if I'd have known the joint was like this, I'd have shot that bum 10 years ago.
Whoa!
Who do you think it was? It was not Vera. She's crying too much.
No.
It was probably Louise, because Louise actually shot her husband. Bessie was going to probably, but didn't get there.
Right.
My guess is Louise, if I had to guess. So that's a recommendation. That's a Yelp review for Oakdale Reformatory.
5 stars.
Yeah. FYI, in Silvia Pettem's book, which we talked about a lot last week regarding Eleanor, called The Blonde Tigress, she points out that one of those reporters who sat with Eleanor on this trip, got to know her a little bit, was thrilled when she escaped, thinking she deserved to be set free.
She did. I mean, like, if you think about it, if you compare these cases, Eleanor never meant for that guy to die. Never meant for that guy to die.
I know, that was never her intention.
But
all of these women, that's
Vera,
exactly what they wanted.
Yeah. They're trying to kill someone. She never wanted to kill anybody. She wanted to provide for her family without killing people. And like, she gets the longest sentence.
They're trying to kill the father of their children.
Yeah. So
again, other things might be at play. Vera never spoke to being abused or anything like that.
I know, but like, just comparing the cases surface level, it's just bullshit.
I know. Anyway, another little history break, because then I also saw a neighboring article.
Oh.
So again, hit that fast forward button if you don't want to hear it. But right next to the headline about these women being taken to jail, and the blonde tigress at the center of it all, and there's a picture of all 5 women. Next to it, there's this article where the headline reads, "Woman scientists discovery fixed virus in kidneys as cause of sleeping sickness." And I found this fascinating because this is something a woman is doing that is also out of the norm, right? She's making a huge scientific discovery, just like Vera and all her friends over there are killing their husbands, also out of the ordinary. But the way that they talk about this shows you the perception of women at that time, just in general. So even in a positive light, how they're talking about it. This disease, just to give you context, it was hitting people out of nowhere. It had recently killed 60 people in St. Louis and affected nearly 500. It had been an actual epidemic in the 1920s, affecting mostly young women. It was called sleeping sickness because it was actually encephalitis, which is a swelling of the brain that made you not feel well and made you sleepy. Oh my God. So anyway, the scientist, Dr. Margaret Smith, who's a graduate of Johns Hopkins, and would later become well known in the field of pediatric pathology. I'm talking, she wrote textbooks on it.
Wow.
Literally. So 1933, her work led to isolating the virus, which helped them work towards a treatment. This article is in the Cedar Rapids Gazette via St. Louis United Press.
Boy.
An attractive but modest woman pathologist tonight held a place of glory in the medical profession because her curiosity led to the discovery that virus in kidney cells is responsible for the widespread sleeping sickness epidemic in the area. So already I was loving it because it's her curiosity. She's like a little kitten who was just curious about those little cancer kidney cells or whatever they are, instead of the fact that she was a medical doctor who was trained at Johns Hopkins. Okay.
And why do we care if she's attractive?
Well, she's also demure, which is the perfect combo, right?
God.
Because if you're in prison, if you're Bessie Opas, you're also attractive, but you're a little flashy with your platinum blonde hair and your beautiful frock. Anyway, it continued. Attired in a blue silk dress, Dr. Smith dodged photographers and sat near her superior, Dr. Howard McCorduck, during interviews with reporters. Okay. Then Dr. M goes on to explain exactly how this discovery happened. And he says, Miss Smith,
rude.
So we've already dropped the doctor, found several slides on my desk, which were to be examined. Casually, she placed them under the microscope and examined them. So Miss Smith just walks in, super curious, and was like, oh my God, what's this slide doing here? Let me look under the microscope. Hey, there's some cells in there. That's what happened. It was just they make it sound like an absolute fluke.
Yeah.
That this shy little lady in a silk dress.
God, fuck you guys.
Isn't it hilarious? I was dying. It's like, Lana's going to love this.
Ridiculous.
Anyway, but it's interesting because these are two opposite events, right? Obviously, this is something positive. This is something, a woman's using her intelligence and making a big discovery. But they're really talking about the women in the same way.
Infuriating.
Yeah. Anyway, quick history moment. Dr. McCorduck passed away in 1938, and it was Dr. Smith who took his place as acting chairman of the department until they appointed somebody else in 1939.
Okay.
A man. With nearly 70 publications to her name, Dr. Smith retired in 1964, and she had been the second female assistant professor at Washington State University and then became a professor in 1957. The Dr. Margaret G. Smith Award is now given at Washington University in her honor.
Cool.
So anyway, I just thought that was fascinating when I saw that. I'm like, oh my God, what discovery what did we discover?
I love this.
Yeah. Anyway, history break over.
Oh.
So Vera's in prison, probably crying every day in her black stockings.
And fainting.
Fainting in front of Superintendent Hazard. And Superintendent Hazard's like, get it together, Vera. What do you think Vera's work detail was?
Nothing heavy. I'll tell you that.
No, she was probably, I bet you she made the dresses.
Oh, she did the sewing nobody else wanted to do.
She's like, you mend, Vera. Stacey did. What do you think Bessie did?
Oh, boy. Maybe led the marching drills in the yard?
I don't know. I don't see her as a hard worker, but maybe. Anyway, while she's in prison, I believe that Vera's son stayed with her mother. Mrs. Greilich took care of Doran, who started going by his first name of George.
Oh.
There's no record of Vera's release, but she appears in the public records at age 44 as a resident of Oakdale. And then in 1942, her name appears on her son's draft registration for World War II. She's listed as George Doran's emergency contact, and she's now changed her name to Frances Greilich. So Frances was her middle name, and Greilich is her maiden name.
Yeah.
And their addresses are listed as the same. So I'm guessing she was out, which is about the right time. She said 8 years was the minimum. So I imagine she got it together. She probably had a good record, and she got out as soon as possible for good behavior.
Jeez.
Again, in the 1950 census data, you can see that she's living with George and now her 82-year-old mother. And George is now the head of the house because he's in his late 20s.
Okay.
George gets married in 1955 to a woman named Camille Cruz, but sadly, Camille passes away in 1968. Vera Francis passed away the following year.
Oh.
A short obituary in the paper reads, Frances Greilich Carl, dear mother of George, mother-in-law of the late Camille, sister of I. Matthew Greilich. Services Wednesday, 9 a.m. I. Matthew is obviously Ivan. Yeah, who showed on the prison records in the 1940 census data. In 1951, a small article appears in the Chicago Tribune that listed Ivan as one of the prisoners asking for release, but I couldn't see what happened. There was no follow-up on the outcome of that trial, but I'm inclined to say that he probably was released before his death in 1973.
Okay.
Because I couldn't find any other record of him at the prison census.
Gotcha.
So those are the other women on the train.
Wow.
What do you think?
Just interesting. I just feel like it just signals to the times around them. All this crazy shit going on.
Yeah, but I mean...
But this one was way grosser to me.
So you think, let's go through the women. Katherine, I don't know if she was guilty. Probably. Right? Louise, we don't have enough to possibly know if it was an
No.
accident or not. So that brings us to our buddy Bessie.
Oh, Bessie. I feel like she doesn't have much of a heart.
I feel like she absolutely did it. If I had to choose, if I had to give one woman innocent, one woman guilty between her and Vera, I would let Vera be the label of innocent over Bessie. And I believe both of them are guilty, but I just really think Bessie did it, and she's bad at it.
Yeah. Awful at it.
Awful.
Pitiful.
The way she talks to the press. I think Vera felt actual remorse afterwards. And she led a quiet life. She wasn't in the papers again. She didn't appear. I mean, I guess Bessie didn't really appear for me either, but I don't know. I feel like Bessie could still get in some trouble. You think both of them are guilty?
Yeah.
The fact that she took Doran out until midnight and drew the blinds tells me she knew.
And the money.
Yeah, and the money. What'd she do with it, though? If it wasn't for the funeral, where did it go?
That's a good question. Ugh, gross. That's how I feel.
Vera had too many people involved in her scheme.
Yeah.
It was 5 people. And why? I don't even understand why John was involved. Did he really
wanted to marry her?
Did he? I don't know.
Why else would he be involved?
I think he just wanted the money.
I mean, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, people are willing to murder others for $800. I know that goes way farther in the 30s, but like, still, it's murder.
Speaking to the times is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because it was so rough and they were unemployed.
Yeah. Nobody has money. Nobody has a job. Things are really desperate. It's
heartbreaking to think of George asking for help.
I know.
From his brother-in-law at the time of his murder.
Ugh. Yeah, I think this is so gross. It's like not even in the same realm as Eleanor.
I know. That's how I feel too. Eleanor's sentence was infinitely worse. And I think that
it's garbage.
She was Katherine who went wrong. That's all that happened. But those are the women on the bus. I don't know about Louise. I couldn't find anything on Louise too, if she got out or when she got out. I assume she was given 20 years, which is also interesting.
I know.
I guess maybe because she committed the crime.
Yeah, that makes more sense. But just still, it's just these sentences. It's just like, humans are humans, and like it's not going to be equal judgment across the board if you get a different judge.
Yeah. Do you think? Okay, here's my question. Do you think Mrs. Ballo, the fortune teller lady, do you think that Vera paid her to say that? Or that Vera just said that and then Mrs. Ballo leaned into it because she had a line around the corner? Or do you think Mrs. Ballo genuinely picked up on some weird stuff and just got the details a little wrong and didn't know that Vera was the one planning it?
I think there's something fishy. There's some involvement of Vera in that, whether she paid her or what.
I know. They never said anything. I wonder if, readings there are some people who are super intuitive for sure, but also if you're, usually it's just somebody kind of being good at reading a person and telling them what they want to hear. I wonder if Vera kind of led the conversation. Like, oh no, death. I've been worried about my husband. But it seems a bold statement to say, yeah, your husband's going to die. That is something
that's what doesn't make sense.
Super easy to prove.
That's a big statement.
I like to think Mrs. Ballo and her Robin were gifted. But she really missed the blind spot on one of those.
Yeah.
She would have been like, hey, Vera, cool it with the plan, okay? Come on now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, what are your last words?
Don't be a jerk.
Yeah. Decent.
Yeah, don't murder people for money.
Or for really any reason.
Well.
Oh, I get a shrug from her. So I guess there are some reasons that will enlighten us to.
Yeah, it just makes me sad. I mean, but who am I to say anything? I didn't live through the 30s. I didn't know how hard it was.
I don't know. It's pretty extreme.
Just awful.
A lot of people didn't take that path.
Exactly. That's true.
How do you repair that as the kids?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
Right. Like Bessie and Vera had children with the person they were trying to kill or killed. How does George just deny it and not think that that happened and believe his mother's innocence? Or does he just understand it? Maybe think, okay, well, his dad was really mean. Or does he just forget about it and think, well, she won't do it again? I would have a hard time trusting after that if it were me.
I mean, I think it's interesting that he changed his name to George.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody recognized the name Doran. It's a very unusual name.
It is unusual, yeah.
And I mean, they all changed their names, Vera and Ivan.
Yeah, that's true.
I think they probably just were recognized too much.
I can't imagine how that would change your perception of the world.
All right, well, who should listen?
Judges, Helen Hazard.
You think she's still kicking?
Or her descendants?
Yeah, her descendants.
Let's see who else. People who are desperate for money. Let's find another way.
Be like Mrs. Ballo. Get yourself the tarot cards, start a business. Get some robins flying in and out.
Yeah, we'll start there. And fishermen, just be careful who you go fishing with, just in case.
Gosh, there are so many opportunities for those schemes to go wrong. I wish they'd actually attempted one of those other ones, because I think George just would have fallen off the boat and been like, why'd you push me in the water? And then he would have been fine, and he would have realized, like, oh, you guys are idiots. It's actually a little unbelievable that they were able to pull it off. It's very similar to Bessie. She just Vera just had older men doing it, which probably is why it worked. Who could be a little bit more together instead of scared 17-year-olds.
Yeah, and you wonder at Joseph's background, too. Who was he?
I know, right?
Where did he come from?
I'm pretty sure Ivan was a vet. I think he was in World War I.
Shit.
I mean, everybody was.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Well, you can find us on all the platforms at
Tea Time Crimes.
You can email us at
teatimecrimes@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Please rate, review, like, subscribe, send us recommendations for teas and crimes, and we'll be back soon. Thank you for listening.
Goodbye.
Aggressive.